So I'm Donna, and I'm with the group Education Freedom for Oregon, and we have prepared a school choice amendment which will amend the Oregon Constitution to provide a constitutionally protected right of all Oregon families to choose where their child goes to school. We filed the amendment at the end of September. Yay! We're right now battling with the teachers union who want to take us down, not surprisingly, and have us not have our measure, not be able to get to the ballot, not allow the voters of Oregon to decide whether they want that or not. So I've spent the last 8 days glued to my computer writing legal briefs, trying to distill down why they're wrong, why they're ridiculous, and why don't they want children to have the choice? Why don't they want children and the children's parents to choose where the best education will come from? And it's interesting because if you think about it, and this is the teachers' unions, we love teachers, just not so much fans of the unions. If public schools are great, and public schools are satisfying all the needs of the students, and the kids are getting a great education, what's the threat of school choice? What's the big fear? And then, if the schools aren't teaching children, aren't satisfying the needs of the children, aren't satisfying the needs of the parents, why won't they let the children go? Either they're great, in which case we're not a threat, or they aren't so great, and why on earth won't they let the children go to where the child can find the best education? It's mystifying to me. So I spent these last 8 days trying to look through these arguments by the unions and think, God, first I'm going to go crazy, and second, why would they do this? So what we did back up this last summer, I ran for school board on a platform of reading, writing, and education, reading, writing, arithmetic, get education back to where it should be, where it was 100 years ago when I was in school, get rid of activism, get rid of politics, and my kids and I drug them out, and they were a little shy, like, I don't want to go to doors. Yes, you are. You're going to the doors. So we knocked down about 7,000 doors, and Suzanne came out, and some other people helped, and we had a great campaign. A lot of folks were very enthused, but I didn't win. So I thought, well, okay, a CRT, CSE, that kind of person won. And so I thought, okay, well, God's got something else in mind for me. And so basically what became apparent is I thought, for a long time I've been thinking about why isn't each child worth, let's say, $10,000? And wherever that child goes, the school will then get that money. Because we all pay income taxes and property tax, and it all goes in this big vault, and that money is supposed to be for education. So I've been thinking to myself, I'm a finance major, this is kind of easy. Why don't we just say the kid's worth, and wherever the kid goes, if they go to school A and school A succeeds, great. If they go to school B and school B succeeds, great. And I thought, well, how hard can that be, right? I'm not a politician, I'm not a legislator, I don't write laws, don't do all that kind of stuff. I was just a little CPA business lawyer. Anyway, so I thought, how hard can this be? So I started researching and writing and talking to think tanks across the country, looking at legislation, looking at existing cases, looking at existing statutes, and it became very clear that it needs to be about freedom. It needs to be about choice, and it needs to come from the people. All the other cases across the country have come through the legislature, through statute, which is fine if you've got sane people in your legislature. We don't. So I thought, okay, well, we got to do this differently because I can't run it through Salem because they won't listen to us. So this needs to be a citizen initiative. This needs to be a by the people, for the people. So I drafted a bunch of stuff, and I talked to a bunch of people, and I worked with other lawyers, and we spent quite a while, and we came up with the end result that we have now, which is the overarching premise is constitutional right of parents to choose the school. And after that, the rest is just details. But that's the key thing, because right now we have a situation where you must go to public school unless you can swing over into the exceptions to compulsory. But those exceptions are based on statute. And statute is what? Made by Salem. So that can be changed, and basically every year they try to attack some other portion of that. Now we do have, luckily, a long line of cases coming out of the United States Supreme Court that have always held, and I want to read some of these, and so I have to put on my glasses, so that you understand basically that that parents are in charge. And somewhere along the road, we lost track of that. So basically, 1923, liberty protected by the Due Process Clause includes the right of parents to, quote, control the education of their children. Pierce, which is the Supreme Court case that came out of Oregon when the governor was trying to say, hey, all you kids, you got to go to public school. And the Sisters of Mercy or something, they ran it up to the Supremes and said, no, no, no. And so the Supreme Court smacked the governor at the time and said, you may not unreasonably interfere with the right of parents to teach their own children. And the court basically held, the liberty of parents includes the right to, quote, direct the upbringing and education of children under their control. The child is not the mere creature of the state. Those who nurture him and direct his destiny have the right, coupled with the high duty, to recognize and prepare him for additional obligations. Woo, that's coming out of Oregon. Well, the Supremes, but on behalf of Oregon. Another one, 1972. The values of parental direction of the religious upbringing and education of their children in their early and formative years has a high place in our society. 1997, over many cases the court has held the liberty specifically protected by the Due Process Clause includes the right to direct the education and upbringing of one's children. And then 2000, the constitutional liberty interest of parents to direct the education of their children is, quote, perhaps the oldest of the fundamental liberty interests recognized by this court. So we are not going to get away, we are not going to let the state get away with telling us that the parents do not have the right to educate their children. But right now, of course, we must either go to public school or fall under the exemption, and the exemptions are based on the statute. So we thought, God gave us all our rights. Our rights come from God. They don't come from the government, because if they come from the government, guess who takes them away? The government. So we're not playing that game. We're going right to the Constitution. We're going to cement into the Constitution the right of parents to choose where their child gets their education. And because we're all about freedom and choice, we have in our amendment both public school choice, which says if you like public school, if those values that are taught in public school align with your values, if that's where you want your child to be, fine. Within public school, we are now giving you the right within your district to choose any school that fits for your child. So if you're in a district that has 5 elementary schools and one of them's really good about geometry and math and high science and all that sort of thing, and you want your child to go there, you can choose to have your child go there. If there are other schools and one of them is really good about sports and you want your child to go there, you can choose within the district, regardless of the attendance boundary, where you want your child to go to. The only catch is that there has to be room at the other place. So we're not going to basically bulldoze through the front door and say, you're taking us all. But the good news, and this is one of the arguments the unions were throwing at us, oh my God, it's an illusory right. No, it's not illusory. Over 17,000 students have left our public schools just since last year. So I'm going to bet that within those 17,300 students, there are a few spots available for all parents to choose to go wherever they want in the district. Okay, so in public school choice then, you can choose a district school, charter school included, if there's room on the other side, and there should be because there's a lot of kids jump and ship. And the only thing there also is you have to pay for transportation. We're not going to say that the bus is going to come, woo, over to this neighborhood and grab your kid and take them over here. But again, we're trying to make sure that the parent has a valid, real choice within the public school system, because we're not trying to destroy the public school system. If it works for you, great. And then conversely, if the public school doesn't work for your child for one of thousands of reasons, or the values that are being taught over there don't align with you, then we give private school choice. And with that, basically, and this is where the rubber hits the road, this is where you will absolutely have the constitutional right to choose the school that won't be taken away by a whim of the legislature. All you have to do right now, for example, for homeschooling, if you want to take your kid out of public school and homeschool, you give notice to your ESD and say, hey, I'm out, I'm homeschooling. And if you want to go to private school, you just basically enroll at the private school sends the notice over to the public school, everything's fine. We don't change anything about that. We don't change anything about what the public schools are teaching or doing. We don't change anything about what the private schools are doing or teaching, and we don't change anything about what homeschoolers are doing. Basically, we say, if you want to use this, you raise your hand and say, I want to opt in, and you give a notice to the Oregon Department of Education, because those are the folks that are writing the checks. You just say, hey, I'm out of public school, or I'm staying in private or homeschooling, and I just want to let you know I've chosen this nonprofit to administer my education savings account, so please send the check over there. So I know people were real confused. Wait a minute, there's ESD and there's ODE. The ESD is how you would notify if you're homeschooling. Nothing changes there. The ODE is just we want to let them know where to send the check, because normally they would have sent it if you were in public school to your school district. So we just want them to know where to send the check. So if you want to go private school or you want to homeschool and you would like to have some money to make it equal for you to choose your educational choice, then you choose the nonprofit who is going to administer it for you, notify the ODE to tell them where to send the check. With that pocket of money then, you were able to use to direct your nonprofit to say, I want to pay for this XYZ private school, I want to pay for this XYZ homeschool curriculum, I want educational therapy, I want tutors for my child, I need a computer, I need some transportation, I need a lot of different things. We've listed them out. Mostly we're trying to make it equal, because right now all of our tax money goes in a vault that's held by Salem, and for some weird reason they only spend it at public schools. It's not constitutionally supposed to be that way, and that's what I've been arguing this past week. So what we're trying to do is we're just saying we're taking a bat and we're whacking the piñata, we're going to break it open, we're going to spread that money around to the students where they actually get their education. So basically, you can ask for an education savings account, the money would then be transferred there, it's held by a nonprofit. We didn't want to let it, as the statutes across the country have done, be run by the government, because we don't like the government. We don't trust them. We don't want them involved. This is all about parents. So parents choose a nonprofit, the money goes to the nonprofit, the parent doesn't touch it. We don't want to have a situation where the opponents will say, oh, the mom's going to go get a boob job or a Caribbean cruise. No, mom can't touch the money. So basically, mom just says, or dad, send the check over here for private school, send this for home curriculum, wherever the money needs to go on approved uses for the child. Because right now, if it's all only being spent for public school kids, that's discrimination against private school families. If they're all paying their taxes and it's all going into pot and it's only being used for public school, and they just choose, and private school parents or homeschoolers decide, public school doesn't work for me, they are financially punished. They must still pay property tax, they must still pay income tax, and guess what they also get the pleasure of doing? Write a check to the private school or write a check to the XYZ curriculum. So we're saying, we're not doing that anymore. We're Rosa Parks, we're standing up saying, no more. Now we're going to say the money goes where the child goes, the money follows the education source, and it can be basically, I don't know how you could argue against it. We're just making sure that the money gets spent for the child. And then another nice thing is, for example, the homeschool folks, if they spend, basically the amount that would come over is a percentage of the amount that's spent right now for state and income and local property taxes. Doesn't include any of the federal money. It's just a portion of this horrible calculation that they do to figure out how much comes from the state income tax and local property tax. We're just taking a portion of that, so some of the remaining amount still stays with the public school, and all of the federal money, all of the other local bond measures, all that sort of thing already stays over there. So again, their whole cry, oh my gosh, you're going to impoverish the public schools. No, we're not. There's still plenty of money to go. And as Suzanne mentioned, they still have $1 billion of COVID relief just sitting there. And they spent, like $10 billion in 2018, 2019, when our proficiencies were like 40% for math and science. That's pretty awful. So if that works for your child and your child is able to do better than that, great. But if that doesn't work, you can choose over here in the private world. You can ask for an education savings account. The money will go from the state into the account. The nonprofit will hold and administer it. You will direct where the money goes. It's for education for your child. Your child gets a better education. Schools aren't punished. Everybody wins. And I know a lot of homeschool folks have been worried, oh my gosh, it's government money, therefore the government's going to come in, knock on your door and come in and tell you what to do. No. We've built in at least 4 levels of protection in our amendment. One is that it's coming through the Constitution, which is the supreme law of Oregon, and so it's going to be cemented in there as a right to parents. Secondly, we are using an education savings account, which is the funding vehicle, and courts have said that once the money goes from the state into the education savings account, it is no longer government money. So it's no longer government money, now it's the parents' money. Any decision about where that money ultimately ends up is the independent choice of the parent, not involving the government. They can't then say, oh, you took my government money, we're going to regulate you. No, you can't. Third, we put specific language in the Constitution to protect, again, push the government over here, tell them, back off, Jack. We're teaching our kids, we're choosing our schools, everybody's going to benefit. And that is that the government may not force the parent or the private school to change their creed, their admission policy, education practice, or curriculum. So it's stay away government, let's let the schools run, let's let the parents choose, let's let the private schools operate. And lastly, we've also put in language that says that the actions of the parent and the education providers are not deemed to be the actions of the government. We do that because we don't want to have a establishment clause challenge by anybody saying, that this is basically the actions entangling with the government, it's all the same thing, and they're all the same people, and therefore there is a way to regulate. No, cut that off, that doesn't work either. So what we're trying to do here is just go back 100 years in time when the parent was, as the guardian, the loving, caring person that takes care of the child and is ultimately responsible for the child, let them have their voice back. Let them choose where the child gets the education, let the child flourish, let the child get the best education to then help themselves in their own life and help Oregon. And one of the things to help Oregon and help the students, another thing with homeschools, and it's applicable to private schools, but the amount of money that goes into the account every year will roll over to the next year. So if, for example, $7,600 comes over for the first year and they use up, let's say, $5,000, well, then $2,600 would roll to the next year and they would get another $7,600. So basically, if you're frugal, more money is going to roll over and roll over and roll over, but there's also the money that you can fully spend and pay for, the needed costs for your child. When your child then completes high school, whether it's from graduating or from completing a homeschool, whatever money is left in that pot, and for homeschoolers, if they aren't spending a whole lot, that could be $50,000 or $60,000. That money is then available to that same child to use for Oregon-based college or trade skill, vocational schools. Again, it came from Oregon parents. We want it to stay in Oregon to benefit Oregon, but now it makes available to basically all the families. And we have to remember that there are very rich people in public schools whose kids are in public schools. Just because they're rich, we don't charge them more in public school. And yes, there are rich people who right now have the ability to have their child go into a private situation or homeschooling. And that's fine, they already have that choice. But what we're really trying to reach is all the folks for whom they don't have these options. They can't move into the fancy neighborhood to get to the good schools. They can't hire the private tutors. They can't pay for educational therapists if their child has a disability. So we're really trying to reach all of those folks. And if some of those folks are the ones who would benefit now from a college fund or trade school, that's fabulous. We want that to happen for them because we want all Oregon families to get the chance to fulfill that dream for their children, which is the best education possible. If it stops at high school, that's fine. If it goes on to college, that's great. If it goes to trade school, whatever. We're not passing judgment. We're just making this available to folks. And why not? I mean, we're all paying taxes. This is the good that we're all trying to achieve, which is education. So we want that to happen. As I say, we're battling the unions right now. They're trying to throw us out. So we'd appreciate any prayers, any words of encouragement or whatever as we take on the giant. And hopefully their hearts will be softened and they'll realize, if nothing else, this is for the kids. I mean, everybody else says, oh, it's for the kids. Well, this one really is. This is really for the kids. I'm retired. I'm doing this for kids I'll never meet. I'm just doing it because it's the right thing to do. We want this to help people. We want it to help Oregon. So send prayers, send money if you want, but just encourage us. Okay, thanks.